What ended up happening was, yeah, at the age of 9, I got hit by a car. And as I continue to tell this story over the last 3 years, I feel like I've started
Yeah.
sharing it over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
What has evolved from the story isn't necessarily the accident itself, but it was more of their transitions, right? I read a book where they're called life quakes. And in an average person's life, you will have about 5 to 7 life quakes. These are pivotal, traumatic turning points. This could be anything
Yeah.
from losing your dream job, losing a loved one,
Mhm.
being, shocked with news, i.e., 9 years
Mhm.
old, Ally Love gets hit by a car, life changes, almost dies in the hospital for 7 days, 5 days in
Mm.
traction, waiting to have surgery because they don't have the instruments to do a hip surgery for a little kid. Usually it happens to young adults. And I tell this story, and I've been telling this story for a while now, in that I had this conversation with my mom. She talked to the doctor. It wasn't going well. And she was just like, hey, and I say it so, so cash, but she was, it was a serious conversation of just like, you have to figure out what you want. Like we wish we could trade places for you, but you got to figure out what you want, because if you want to live, then you got to pray and fight for your life. But if you want to go on, that is totally up to you. And again, I say it so casually. It didn't happen that casually. It was a very intense conversation. And I quote my mom, even though to this day she says she blacked this out, is that I said, you know what, I'm gonna fight, and I'm gonna continue to fight for my life and pray. And those two things are the two things that allow me to do what I do today. In the darkest and the lightest moments of my life, I'm able to pray and fight for my life. And so it was through
This was
dance
a
that I was
conversation that they had with you as a
my mom,
9-year-old.
9 years old. 9 years old. And you know what? I commend her, because even today, she's always down to have tough conversations. Hell, she just loves to talk.
That
I'm
is
not, this is where I
tough.
get it from. But yeah, but it's like she had the fortitude, and she provided me the responsibility and onus to decide what I wanted to do for my life. And I think being able to make a decision at 9 years old about my own life, knowing like these are my options, this is what I need to do. Like I need to fight. I need to like make sure she's like, and then again, when I said I wanted to fight, she was practical. You need to eat food, because I was not eating. She's like, these are things the doctor said. You need
Oh.
to hydrate. Like we need you to keep things down. Like, so now I know what I started focusing on, hyper focusing as a kid. You tell a kid, in order to go outside and play, you need to finish that plate of vegetables. They have a goal. They're hyper focused on that goal, and they're going to do what it takes to get there. And that's exactly what my mom afforded me, that opportunity to be hyper focused on. Okay, I need to fluids, food. I need to stay awake. I need to go to sleep at like certain times. Like she was like, it's time for bed. Like you need to rest. And so all those things, I think, was a combination at a young age of learning how to make decisions in my life.
That car accident almost killed you, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
So yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what it sounds like. How often do you think about that every single day?
No, I don't think about it as much. I do talk about it. So interesting enough, Chad, like I talk about it more now than I ever have. And
Huh.
it was in the pandemic. Because one, I don't like when people feel sorry for me. I don't want people to,
Right.
but then I also don't want folks to look at me with rose-colored glasses like she has it all together. And I think most people's lives are somewhere in between, right? You're trying really hard, you're trying
Yeah.
your best, and you're putting your best foot forward. And there's some stuff in that closet that you've dealt with or dealing with, and some of those life quakes. And so I live
That
somewhere in between. And so I started sharing this more so to kind of sculpt the story and the narrative of why, which kind of you mentioned, Julie, is like, I'm not yelling at you, I encourage you. Why are you so quote unquote positive or motivating? And I think it stemmed from, I know it stemmed from these positions of almost losing my life. Like I know what that feels like. I know how that feels. And it wasn't over because, anyone who's ever had a traumatic situation, they're always like, if you have a life quake or any earthquake, they're aftershocks. So I almost had to have, I
mm,
actually had to have another surgery my teenage years that took me away from
Ooh.
dance when I fell in love with dance, which I don't tell this part. So let's, Chad, I got you. You're like, let's get
I
into some
want
things.
it. Yeah, let's get
please.
into it.
Actually never shared this, but when I found finally, I don't know if you've ever been in this position, whether you're a kid or an adult, you finally find something you love. You're like, I belong here. Like you can
Right.
find the person you belong with, the place, like
Mhm.
you just like,
Mm.
I have a sense of belonging, and that feels so good. And I finally found it. I fell in love with dance. I started getting feedback from teachers. I got accepted into New World School of the Arts, which is like the best arts high school in the nationally, but also in the state of Florida. It's like the top 3 performing arts school. One's LaGuardia in New York, and one is in Texas. And so to get into this was like a sign. I was like, this is it. God is saying, like, I'm gonna dance. I'm really good at it. The best in the world say I'm good at it.
Hmm.
And my freshman year, I went to the doctor, and they were like, so at some point in your adult life, you have to have another surgery. And
Hmm.
it's going to affect you even more harshly because, y'all all know once
Right.
you get old, things don't
Yeah.
heal the same way. It's
Right.
not that
Right.
fast.
Hmm.
And so that's what happened. They're like, it's going to take you out longer than when you actually got hit by a car. And I just got into the school, and I remember talking to my mom And the reality was, they said if I kept it in longer, I was gonna have arthritis, even as a teenager. They're like, at probably sophomore, junior year, you're just not gonna be able to move at certain, like winter time and things like
This
that.
was the hip again? Was it the hip or the thigh or
Same
the
hip.
femur?
Your
The
femur,
hip.
yes. Yes, your
Okay,
femur.
where
So
it
I had
connects
like
into your hip.
Mhm. I had a plate with 4 screws in it, and I
Oof.
had like 14 stitches, like internal stitches, and then 14 staples. And so what ended up happening is I had to have that conversation with my mom again, and I was like, you know what, let's do it. And my mom, I mean, such a G. I was like, they might kick me out of school because I'm in the school to dance, and I
Right.
can't dance for the
Yeah.
entire freshman year.
Hmm.
So I found this out right before school started. My freshman year, I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I have no friends. So like I have to make new friends, kick off the new year, going into surgery. And right before surgery, we went in to talk to the principal and the assistant principal. And they're like, unfortunately, we need to give her a spot to someone else. Like she can't be here. She
Right.
cannot perform the
Right.
requirements. So she has to go. And my mom, being such a G, she was like, absolutely not. What are the requirements? She needs to be in dance class. She's like, she'll be there. She just won't be dancing. She can take as many notes. She can watch. She will be in every class. She will not miss a class. Like she won't, because I could have an outpatient surgery. She's like, she'll be back in time for school. And so if those are the requirements and she meets the requirements, you can't kick her out of school. And they didn't kick me out of school. I was able to literally sit in millions of dance classes and take copious amounts of notes around what my peers were doing. So it was like one of those things where you go to a school and you're really starting from the bottom.